Welcome to Story Strategy Live with Dawn and Nancy at Evident Inc. We're going into our Back to Basics series again today. We'll be talking about hooking, and not that kind of hooking, silly readers. I don't know why everyone thinks the worst, Dawn. Maybe it's because I advertised it that way for so long.
I was going to say, yeah, it might just be us. They might not be thinking that. It might just be us.
That's true. Oh, well, it's more fun that way. No, we're talking about how to hook your readers in the first line, the first scene, the first chapter, how to make them go from page to page without putting your book down.
Yes, it's very important.
But before we get there, before we get there, do you have a funny story for us? Everybody needs funny right now.
We do need a funny story right now. And I do have a story for us because we had Halloween. And again, I'm sharing the story with my son's permission because I don't need him watching these later in life and being like, I don't believe you told the world that. So as I mentioned, whenever I told the last story on him, my son is a senior in high school. And he, on Halloween night, because they couldn't really go do anything and they're kind of, the world is what it is, we let him have some people over to watch movies. And so their plan was they were going to watch both of the It movies back to back, the first one and the second one. Not my thing. I read the book when I was in high school because of peer pressure. I still have nightmares. No, I have no desire to see it. And they keep trying to tell me it's a comedy. My son keeps going, oh, Mom, I'm like, I'm sure there's some part of it, but no, I'm not watching it.
No.
So
can we go back for a second? I like that your peer pressure in high school was to read a certain book, because that wasn't what mine was like.
There was other peer pressure involved too. That was just I had a friend who was very into Stephen King, and so I gave in to her so that we would be able to talk. But so my husband and I went out for a little while, and they had all the lights in the house are off. It's completely, they are in full horror movie. Ugh. They're all spread out across my family room. There's an amazing amount of food in my living room. They're settled in to watch this movie. And so we were gone for a while. We come back, every single light in the house is on, including like the light in my pantry. My pantry is like 4x4. You can't hide in there. Every light in the house is on. And I'm like, so what's going on? And so evidently, let me show you my friend here, if I can. Some of y'all have, seen Penny there.
There's Penny.
There's Penny. While at some key point in the movie, which again, I have not seen the movie, so I don't have any idea what this key point was. We have a very open concept house. And so my office is in the front, and then there's a game room, and then there's the kitchen, and then there's the family room. And Penny likes to sleep in that chair in my office. That's her spot. And at some very key point in the movie, Penny got up and started growling into the empty game room. And so my son got up and was calling to her, and she wouldn't come to him, which is very unusual. He is her person, he's her person. And so for her not to come to him is a very unusual thing. And so he's like, Penny. And he said she stopped about halfway in the kitchen and just stared at him for like a solid 15 seconds, turned back around, went back to growling at whatever it was she was seeing in the game room, and then disappeared back into my office, which at that point was in total darkness.
Oh, I don't like that. That's scary. I would turn lights on too.
He said that it was like, they didn't discuss it. It was just silent mutual agreement that everybody jumped up, every light came on, and that was followed by a SWAT style sweep of my house with them holding onto my kitchen knives.
You're lucky nobody stabbed somebody else by accident.
Well, and okay, can we talk about, two of these boys are varsity football players, and they are like what you would picture of their big varsity football players. And like, and I probably am not supposed to share this part, but like one of the varsity football players made somebody else stand outside the bathroom while he went in. And then Peter's like, so we decided to play cards. We decided we weren't interested in watching the movie anymore.
We weren't interested.
Yeah, we're just gonna hang out here.
Oh, poor boys.
So, yeah. and then Penny, of course, was back asleep in her spot in the chair. Like, I have scared the humans.
Maybe she was sleep barking, sleep growling.
She does sleep really hard. She does snore, so she might have just gotten up and been like. But yeah, she totally was like, "Yep, I freaked them out. Okay, I'm
so
good."
Funny. Maybe she wanted some chips or something and they wouldn't share, and that's how she got back at them.
Yeah, that's very possible. So so that's funny story. He told me I could share it. Like his friends watch our podcast, so we're fine.
Probably not. All right. Well, if anyone is working on Nano, I hope it's going well for you guys. And more power to you. Thanks. You what?
I'm encouraging.
Oh,
keep going. If you're working on Nano, keep going. That's me rowing the boat. Keep going.
Well, where are we? We're on day 5. And there are 30 days in November. I don't know why I'm going down this path, because you could probably feel that I'm about to try to do math, which you should never do in public anyway.
You go for it.
Yeah. So I was going to say something really smart, like you should be 15% through, but I never mind. I hope you're doing well.
Yes.
I hope you have at least 1,000 words.
Good writing vibes with no math. That's what we're going to do.
There's no math in Nano. Okay. Well, so today we're going to talk about something that's going to be important for Nano or any writing project, and that's how to get people to move from page to page, sentence to sentence, chapter to chapter. And that's by hooking your reader, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what do we mean? Like, what are some, so what do we mean really by hooking the reader?
You've got to get their attention. You've got to draw them in. And so you want that moment of, if you're planning on doing something else, but you're like, I have 30 minutes. I'll check out this book and see what I think of it. And then you want that moment of, they're like, yep, nothing else is getting done. Got to keep reading.
Yeah. Or better yet, well, if they have managed to put it down, you want them to be thinking about it the whole time they're not reading it. Like, I am reading a book right now that is like that, where I'm like, can't wait to like sit back down.
Yes.
And that hardly, like, honestly, I read great books that I love. And even with a lot of the ones that I end up finishing, like, oh, that was fantastic, I don't feel that way. So I think it's a pretty, hard to attain goal, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't try. And
right.
Just because your reader's not walking around like that, excited to pick the book up and unable to think about anything else, doesn't mean that you're not doing it right. But that's like the pinnacle, I think.
Well, and you have to get them past that opening to get them to the, I'm excited to, I keep thinking about it. I'm excited to go back to it. And what we see with a lot of new writers is the story really gets good around chapter 5.
Right. But I have to give you all of this information for you to understand what's going to happen in chapter 5.
Right. And so you've got to start off with something that's going to bring me in, because your story may be amazing at chapter 5, but if by chapter 2, I don't know what's going on or I'm completely bored, I'm not going to make it to that point.
Yeah, it's got to be somewhat amazing on page 1. Hopefully sentence 1, if not for sure paragraph 1.
Yes.
There's got to be something. So what are some things that people can do to, just in general, we'll go into more detail as we go through this, but what are some sort of strategies that you can use in those first couple pages, paragraphs, scenes even?
Well, I think one of the main things you want to do in the very beginning is you want to create some kind of question for the reader that they have a desire to know the answer to. And that's the important part, is you want the question to be something that they're like, that sounds interesting. I'm going to hang around long enough to see if I can figure this out. You don't want the question to be, I don't know what the hell's going on.
Right.
Or what are we even talking about? Who are these people? So you want to create curiosity, not confusion. That is your goal.
Can we take a small little divergence here? Because my husband and I got in a little argument about exactly this. Not really an argument, but we started watching The Mandalorian. Have you watched it?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, so my kids finally begged me for the Disney Plus thing so we could watch it. So we got it. So we have been watching it as a family. And the first episode, I was like, I'm probably not the target market. I like Star Wars. Like I've seen not all of them, but I'm not like a diehard fan. I don't memorize the lines or anything. I don't really remember which movie was which one. But so it opens in like a bar. It's dirty and grimy. There's a whole bunch of people, a lot of stuff going on. There's some kind of like conflict happening. I don't know who anyone is. I don't really care. Like I just didn't care. And eventually you figure out who the main character is and like why we are supposed to care about him. But I was like, this is the opposite of like how I want this to start. Like, I want to know who I'm supposed to be rooting for, and I want to know why I have to care about them, like right at the beginning. I don't want to be in a bar with a bunch of random people and a bunch of crap going on.
Right.
And my husband was like, yeah, but that's not for you. That's for the Star Wars diehards, because it's a parallel to the bar scene in blah, 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 blah. And, you know, like he hummed the song that was playing in the other bar scene and stuff. And I was like, see, you're the target audience. So I think that's another point that I kind of got out of it. Because at first I was like, they did it all wrong. Like they did everything wrong. This is horrible. When I was like, you know what? They know their audience. And as far as he was concerned, they did it right.
Which is probably something we need to point out while we're going through this is we deal mostly in romance, thrillers, some sci-fi, some fantasy. And so there's different expectations for your hook there as there is in like literary fiction or even some women's fiction, because some of those are expected to start a little slower.
I would still argue, you know, when I've got 9 million books to choose from in the Kindle store, yours better pull me in on page 1, because I'm happy to spend $2.99 and decide I have better things to do. I do it all the time. Like I would rather not waste my money, but I do it. If I'm not gripped, I'm like, I don't have time to read this.
Yes. So your goal in that opening is you're setting up your question. You want, like I said, curiosity, not confusion. And you're setting up what we like to call the promise of the premise. Yes. You're giving them some idea of what this story is going to be like and what the author's tone is like. And exactly, I love what you just said. And who should we care about? Whose side are we on here?
Yeah. Introducing too many characters right away is just a recipe for disaster, in my opinion.
Yes. Yeah. If you're opening up in a diner and the waitress is not going to be important later, the waitress does not need a name.
Right.
It's
and POV.
Yes.
Yes. So you set up your POV in the first couple sentences too. Like we need to know who's talking and like whose head are we in if we're in someone's head.
Well, and I personally, and of course, this is going to be one of those things where I'm like but it can be done well. And so there's going to be caveats to everything we say today. But I personally do not love books that start with just dialogue.
See, I do.
Because sometimes it's like, well, okay, you can start with a line of dialogue, but you need to immediately tell me who this is, why I like them, and where we are.
Right. Julie says to a newbie, this is a terrifying conversation. And I just want to reassure you, we're going to give examples. I have like a whole pile of books here. We're going to read some awesome examples.
We've got examples, and it's okay if you don't get this, because one of the things we're going to talk about in just a second is the importance of the first line. And the first line you write when you're drafting that book does not have to be the first line when that book is getting published. That can change.
Yeah, totally.
So don't put a lot of pressure on yourself to create the amazing first line if you're just trying to get the story out.
Yes, that. Well, and so you've got one more bullet here, but I was going to run into the importance of opening lines. But so Dawn put a note in here that I think is actually really important, and I'm sure you realized this, but I kind of added to it. The Amazon, assuming that your book will be published on Amazon, and assuming you've probably bought books there, they have the look inside feature, right? So usually that'll show you the first, I can't remember, 3%, 7%, something like that. Okay. So for indies, this is super important because everything that you put out that's visible to the public before they buy your book is considered sales copy. So that blurb on your front page, any reviews that you post, anything that you put out that's public facing is basically a tool at your disposal to sell that book. So with the look inside feature, that includes the first 10 pages, possibly. And it's also a reason why the way that books get formatted for indie publishing is a little different usually. Most seasoned indie authors at this point, unless they have a built-in following who they know will just always buy their book no matter what, will move their copyright, their table of contents, and maybe even dedication or anything like that all to the back, so that the first thing that you see when you do that look inside is not 4 pages of stuff you don't care about, but the very first line of the book instead. So think carefully.
We're trying to hook you.
Yes, in revision, really focus on those first few pages, and that's exactly what we're going to be talking about here, and why it is so important.
Okay, so we've got examples of first lines, and this is so much fun. I love looking at the first lines of books.
I do too. I went through my whole bookcase today, like, oh.
Because I'm sorry, I know y'all are seeing me move around a lot. There's something wrong with my chair, so if I fall out of it, okay, fall. I'm good. So I put some examples in there. Do you have an example you want to do first, or do you want me to go first?
You can go first.
Okay. So first lines are super important because that kind of is setting up the tone and all of that for your book. Now, we say that, and it's because editors like us love good first lines. We're like, oh, that's awesome. Very few people are going to put your book down based on the first line. They're probably going to give you the first paragraph or 2 at least. So don't panic if you're trying to figure out how to make this great first line and you're like, I don't know how I would ever come up with that. There's a lot of flexibility in there, but some really great first lines that I came up with, which was so hard because, like you said, I was looking at my bookshelf and I was like, oh, we could use this one, or oh, we could use this one. And then I went to my Kindle, and that was just...
I didn't even go into mine because I was like, I don't want to try to dig through all these.
So many there. But so the first one I picked out is from the book The One for You by Ronnie Loren. And that is the 4th book in her The Ones That Got Away series. But I love this first line because it is, Ashton Isaacs had a hard-on in the back row of the stuffed shelves children's section, and Kincaid Breslin had never been more delighted.
Which makes you go, okay, let's see. Why does he have a hard-on? Why are they in a children's store? Who is this Breslin? Kincaid. And why does this make her happy? Yes. So it's about to get really good right off the bat.
Right, yeah. And if you've read the other books, you know who Kincaid is.
Okay.
Because she's a consistent character. Ashton is new, but you know who Kincaid is. If you haven't read the other books, you still kind of get a feel for Kincaid's personality, immediately, because she's not embarrassed. She's not scandalized. She's kind of delighted and thinks it's really funny. And moving past that in the beginning of the book, what you find out, because again, you're creating curiosity of the questions of why are they in this book? You find out they work in the bookstore. The bookstore is closed. So he's not, doing anything inappropriate. The bookstore is closed. She forgot her backpack. She came back to get it. And he is sitting in the children's section back there reading a romance novel. And so she makes a noise, and of course he jumps up and knocks stuff over and all this kind of stuff. And so it sets the tone for you.
Well, so here's a good one for you. This is from Tracy Brogan's book, The Best Medicine, which I highly recommend if you haven't read it. It's adorable and hilarious. So chapter 1. Birthday parties are a lot like pelvic exams, a little uncomfortable, a little awkward, a little too personal, but an unavoidable yearly nuisance, like a pap smear, only with presents.
Nice.
So it doesn't necessarily set up the characters, except that you get that humorous tone.
Yes, you very much get the voice right there.
You kind of see what you might be in for with this book, just from A, the comparison, B, the tone. So it doesn't bring you into anyone's head necessarily. I guess it kind of does.
Oh, but, yeah. That tells you a lot about the person you're about to hang out with for a while.
Yeah. I just thought that was hilarious.
Yes. I love that. Well, and then one of my favorite books in the whole wide world is Ready Player One. It is not the movie. I don't know what book they read to create the movie. The movie's okay by itself, but it's not the book. The book is completely different. And I'm going to be totally over Thanksgiving, just completely fangirling because the Ready Player 2 is coming out. And I'm waiting for that. But anyway.
The book, not the movie.
The book. Yes.
Okay.
the book. So the opening line of Ready Player One, which is kind of setting up, and I pulled this because it's a completely different tone, and it's not from a romance novel. It's setting up the adventure story. Is the opening line is, everyone my age remembers where they were and what they were doing when they first heard about the contest. I was sitting in my hideout watching cartoons when the news bulletin broke in on my video feed announcing that Jim Holiday had died during the night.
So I want to know, what contest? Who's Jim Holiday? Why do you have a hideout?
Right. And why are you watching cartoons there?
Yeah. How old are you?
Right.
Yeah. So we know that this contest is going to be important, and that there's life and death stakes involved somehow.
Yes.
I like it. All right. I've got another one. Man Candy, Melanie Harlow. Might have edited this book. I thought this was great. So I'm going to read, it's a couple, it's not the first line as much. The first line is, I was in the closet. But then it goes on. That's not a metaphor, by the way. I was literally physically trapped in a closet. It wasn't even my closet. It was his. And it had that guy closet smell, you know? And it goes on from there. But
yeah, and that totally, that's like somebody sitting down over margaritas to tell you a story.
That's how all of her books are. They have this tone that, I'll be working on it and then realize that I'm halfway through it. And it's some books are harder, and Melanie Harlow's tone is just so easy to read. But it's like your girlfriend just pulled you over, I got to tell you something.
Right. So I was in this closet.
Yeah.
And we all have those friends that that's not the weirdest thing you've ever heard them say. So you're like, oh, okay, tell me more about the closet. I mean,
yeah.
So, okay. And then I have one more, speaking of setting the tone.
Okay.
Because that's what we're trying to do. You're creating the questions, you're setting up the premise, you're setting up the voice, all of that. And this one is from Stealing the Bride by Nadia Lee. And I love this first line because it sets up so many questions. It says, the bride is over my shoulder, wiggling like a trout caught between a bear's paw. And it's true. My paw is on her ass. So maybe she feels like a trout, even though we're on a beach and there are no bears in Maui. And she's screaming like a banshee.
That's pretty good.
So you immediately are like, okay, first of all, why does he have a bride over his shoulder on a beach in Maui, and why is she screaming?
Yeah.
And it's
plus kind of what's going on because of the name of the book.
Right. And so it's very much a romantic comedy. It's you get the tone right there, you get the author voice right there, you get the character's voice right there because that's in first person. And it sets it up to hook your reader and make them want to keep reading. Yeah.
This is making me want to go back and read all my first lines to see how they went because I don't remember.
And I do think that Delancey Stewart has some great first lines.
I don't know. I went through a couple books and wasn't super impressed. I did pull this one, which is Scoring a Prince. It was the third book in Mr. Match. And it's the prologue, though. But I guess that counts.
That's the first line. That's the first thing somebody's going to read.
But it says, and it's Max's voice. It's not our hero. But you don't know that if you haven't read all the books. So you'll figure it out. But anyway, it says they say lightning never strikes twice, which I'm pretty sure is complete and utter bullshit.
Yeah. See, that's character voice right there.
It doesn't really tell you what you're about to read, though.
But it tells you what you're getting into. It tells you who that's more of your voice too. So that's going to bring the reader in of, oh, well, why do they feel that way?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about some do's and don'ts.
Yes. So obvious things. We're talking about starting. Okay. Yeah. Right, we're going to talk about how to hook at the end of the scenes next.
Yes.
All right. So how should you not start your book or your scene or your chapter?
So this is one of those things of, we're going to say, don't do this. And somebody else is going to say, but this book does it well. So yes, it can be done well. And we're going to talk about how you do that well. But generally, you don't want to start with somebody waking up.
Yeah.
Now, if The Hunger Games starts with Katniss waking up, but She wakes up and she immediately notices her sister is out of bed. You immediately get drawn into the, okay, where is she? What's the problem? Why is she so panicked that she's out of bed? So that can work. Where we talk about people not waking up is you don't want sound of the alarm, and then I get up, and then I walk in and look at myself and describe myself in the mirror as I'm brushing my teeth.
Yeah.
And then you need something that's moving, something that's going to get your story going, that tells us something other than basically like a Scope commercial would about your character.
Well, and I think that this one stymies people because we hear that you're supposed to set up their normal world in the beginning. When you meet a character, set up the normal world before they cross the threshold into adventure. But like the normal world doesn't have to be, I am going to have avocado toast and coffee and my mom calls, unless your mom is calling to say something that's going to start this story going somewhere, then don't give us any of that.
Right. Start with, I'm sitting here drinking my coffee. I just dropped my avocado toast and it landed face down on the floor. The cat's eating it. And now my phone's ringing and it's my mother.
Right.
So
right.
It's gotta be set up different. Some of the other don'ts is don't start with the weather unless, it was a beautiful day outside.
It was a dark and stormy night.
So unless it's I'm standing on my front porch watching a hurricane, or
because that's what the story is going to be about.
Right, because that's what the story is going to be about. Or I woke up to lightning striking twice on my house.
Yeah.
It's got to pull us in. It's got to make you want to keep reading. Now, the other side of that is, like we were saying, some books, like some literary fiction, sometimes they will dedicate, setting up the scene, and you're in this beautiful seaside town and you're experiencing the wind blowing through your hair. It's a little bit slower pace, but there's still got to be something there keeping my attention.
Yeah. I mean, I hate always throwing literary fiction out the window, like, hey, they can do whatever they want. Because the key is that you're still looking for reader eyeballs. You still want the interest. You want to pull people through the story. So I think maybe those who read a lot of lit fic are a little more patient. But if you're writing a romping rom-com or a thriller or a mystery, you got to get it going. Don't expect that your reader's going to hang in there while you describe the wallpaper, because unless it's historical fiction.
You got to move us along.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to back up and say something else about that too. Getting it going is not the same as throwing us in the middle of something that we don't know what's going on.
True. Yes.
And so there's the whole, I think it's an Alfred Hitchcock thing. I don't know. I'll have to look that up before our next thing. But about the bomb, that if you start the story with a bomb going off, that's not really drawing the reader into the story because they don't know anything about what just happened.
They don't understand the stakes. Yeah.
Right. But if you start the story with two people sitting in a cafe and, there's a bomb under the table, then that's setting up the stakes. That's a hook.
Right.
Julie's asking a question.
A hook could be finding interest in the person speaking. I think we need a little more explanation what you mean. Like
if the person says something interesting, or if you start off with somebody speaking and then I don't understand.
Or I was thinking like from a romance perspective, like you're someone speaking and you're becoming interested. I'm not sure. And then Laura says, I keep thinking of the long introduction to the movie Sabrina, lots of exposition. And so again, I don't remember, but there's always an exception, right? And I don't know if that movie was super highly rated. I liked it, but.
Right. Well, and okay, so I'm going to pick on Rebecca for just a minute. And I think we picked on Rebecca.
I was like, who is Rebecca? You're talking about the book. Okay.
The book Rebecca. Because like when you see workshops and stuff given on first lines, Rebecca is one of the ones that always has like the famous first line of last night I dreamt I went to Manderley again.
Oh.
Well, that's a great first line. And then it goes into this long exposition about her dreaming she's walking through the path and flowers and more flowers and some more flowers. But she dreams about she's walking through the path, and it gives you little hints about everything that happened along the way. Mm-hmm. That mentions her dog, and she mentions several other things. So yes, it can be done well. And that is a good first line because you're like, why are you dreaming? What is Manderley? That all of those kind of things.
Yeah.
I think that book would have a little bit more trouble today.
Yeah, that's the other thing. When we look at the classics, I think readers were just far more patient. Mm-hmm. But we live in a bite-sized world now where, I don't want to watch something that's more than 3 minutes long. I need to know everything in those 3 minutes. So flash it across the screen.
That brings us to another don't is one of the other things you will hear is don't start off in a dream.
Oh, please don't do that. I mean, because you can, but
you can, and it can be done well. But often your reader's going to feel cheated when they realize I just went back through this. I just went all through this, and now I'm starting over again. Because generally, you go from the dream to the person waking up, and it's like, okay, wait a minute, what?
Yeah. So don't forget, your reader is giving you their trust, right? They're like, okay, I spent some money on this book. I'm going to open it up now. I want to go on a journey. So you have a lot of power as the writer. You're taking this person, like imagine guiding someone with blinders on down a hallway and you say, okay, look over there. Okay, look over there. Okay, now it walks forward. Now look over there. You're in charge of what they see, what they hear, what they experience. So you have to remember that that person doesn't know anything except what you show them. And you've got to show them the things that matter and things that are interesting in order to keep them coming down the hall. Otherwise, they're going to be like, no, screw this. Like they're going to be confused. And your goal is not to confuse the reader.
I think when you're talking about walking down the hallway, the other thing is you've got to think about you're walking down the hallway with a time limit. Mm-hmm. You don't have time to show them all the paintings on the hallway because we got to get down. So you need to show them the ones that are vital to them and get this. Yes, you're curating. I love that. That's great. Okay, so moving on from talking about beginnings, because we're talking, I love the hallway. We're in the hallway. Yes. But I love the hallway because after you get them into the hallway, like you just said, you got to keep them going. You got to keep pulling them down. Excuse me. Which is what's bringing us to our chapter hooks.
There's going to be a door and you got to make sure that they actually want to walk through it and that they're going to come with you and not be like, all right, you know what? Never mind.
Right. And so you're giving them a reason to keep turning the page and you want to avoid ending the chapter with them having a reason to not go through that door.
Yeah.
To be like, oh, this is good and set it down and walk away.
So how do we do that? That sounds hard.
Well, we're gonna talk about some examples here in a minute, but I think this is one of those where starting with the don'ts kind of helps make it a little clear. Is you don't want to start with somebody going to bed or end the chapter with somebody going to bed. Or somebody, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that, like ending anything, ending the day, ending a car ride, ending a phone conversation. Like if it's a natural ending point, it's going to feel totally natural for your reader to put the book down at that point. So don't end scenes at places where people are naturally going to walk away. Does that make sense?
Right. Well, and one of my clients one time was telling me that she was reading a book that was written by a friend of mine that she said, I've stopped reading it. And I'm like, why did you stop reading it? And this was a romance writer. She knows the romance formula, all that. And she's like, because if I set it down and walk away now, I know they're happy and I don't have to deal with everything that's about to come. So I'm just not reading it yet and she was only like, not even to the midpoint yet, because that's where everything changes. She's like, but I know that if I just don't read anymore,
then they'll stay happy forever.
They'll stay happy forever. And I'm like, they're going to end up together. And she's like, yeah, that's not the point. So you don't want to have that part. You don't want to have that moment where the reader's like, now I think she had ended in the middle of the chapter actually, but you don't want to have that moment where they can just put the bookmark in, close the book and walk away from it. And they don't have that curiosity and that pull. There isn't the conflict set up to bring them into the next chapter.
Right. Well, so how do we bring in enough conflict to keep them going to the next chapter?
Well, this is where it goes back to where we talked about scene structure last week. And we talked about how when you end the scene, the character either got their goal, but there's a new complication, or they didn't get their goal, and to make things worse, there's a new complication.
Right.
And it's complications and new conflicts that are pulling it forward.
So what we're doing by not giving them exactly what they want is pushing up that tension. Mm-hmm. And the reader will feel that because they know that the goal has not been achieved or that there's a new problem. And so that's the tension that you capitalize on to keep them going to the next chapter. So how do you do that?
Well, that's where you got to have these awesome hooks at the end. And so like we talked about, you end on the high point of the tension so that you have that feeling of, well, I'm just going to read the next few pages just to see, just to relieve this tension until they get to a stopping point. And then you never have the stopping point.
Yeah, because it's human nature to want to wrap things up, to want to know, okay, this is all taken care of. I can put that over here and go do this thing now. You don't ever want to give them a point where they can do that.
Yes, not until the end. At the epilogue, everything can be wrapped up. And then if they don't read the epilogue, it's okay. But you want to keep pulling them through. And so you've got the high point of the tension or a new revelation or discovery,
Right.
Which is important, especially, I mean, it's important in romance too, but in thrillers and mysteries, because that's where you have your twist or your reversal or the stakes are escalated. You have something else that has happened that makes you have to go to that next page.
Right. So even if it's the end of the day, like sometimes you have to end the day in the book, everybody's going to bed, but one character discovers that there's a note in so-and-so's hand next to the murder weapon, or I don't do that, but you know what I mean? Like, and then everyone else has gone to bed. So you know that the next scene is going to deal with this thing that has just been found, and oh no, like what will go on there?
Well, and kind of along that same lines, it has to not feel contrived.
Right.
And so if you have a character going to bed, and I know we're picking on going to bed a lot, but if you have a character going to bed and they're laying there and they're like, well, tomorrow, I guess I'll look for the next clue. Okay, well, of course, that was what you were going to do tomorrow. That's right. That's why we're here. Or, I'm laying there in a romance, laying there thinking about the love interest and being like, whatever should I do about him? Okay, well, we know that's what you're questioning. Give us something that we're not expecting that's going to make us keep reading.
So then you say, I should never have sent the text that I sent next, or something like that. So that, and you're like, oh my God, who did you text? Like you were drunk. You shouldn't have texted anyone.
Who did you text? What did you say? I've got to read it. So you've got the ending on emotional or on the high point in the tension, a revelation or discovery, or ending on an emotional climax of there's so much going on. The reader has to keep reading because there's going to be more stuff going on.
And I would add too, which I mean, we kind of talked about it, but adding like ending on a question where there's a clearly, it may not be an actual question mark question, but where your reader is going to be like, what is going on? Like, I must find out.
Yeah. Again, creating that curiosity, even if your character doesn't end with a question, creating that curiosity is important.
Right. So read us your example.
Okay. So the book, The Dry by Jane Harper.
Very good. She made me read it.
Yes. Very good book. Jane Harper has a new book coming out in February, just by the way, just have to throw that out there. So when I saw this book, somebody mentioned it on social media and I'd never heard of her. And they were like, go to Amazon, read the look inside feature, and I guarantee you're going to order this book. And of course I was like,
that is good sales copy right there.
Yeah. I'm like, well, let's see. I'm going to go check it out. And then I was like, buying now, oh, look, Prime, it will be here tomorrow. And so the opening line of The Dry is, it wasn't as if the farm hadn't seen death before and the blowflies didn't discriminate. To them, there was little difference between a carcass and a corpse.
Ugh.
And so that like draws you in because you're like, oh, especially me and my thriller and mystery. I'm like, oh, we have a carcass and blowflies and bad things have happened. And so you read through the opening chapter, but what really gets you, because it's talking about something really, really bad has happened, and it's being told very third person, very far away, which y'all know me and my obsession with deep POV. And so for me to really get into something being told that far away, the writing is amazing. It's being told very detached. until you get to the last line of the chapter. And the last line of the chapter is, so nothing reacted when deep inside the house, the baby started crying. And yeah, and I was like, I have to have this book. I have to have this book. I have to know why the baby, well, I knew why the baby was crying, but I have to know, is somebody going to come save the baby? What is going on?
Well, and that was very effective. But you know what made me mad about that book? I mean, not enough that I didn't like the book. I love the book. But after you move on to the next chapter, it goes somewhere completely different for a really long time. And you're like, but the baby over there crying.
And that's another thing that has to be done very carefully, is if you set up a prologue, or if you set up, in thrillers, a lot of times they want to set up the villain's POV and this crime is happening. Or if you set up a portion of the book, which is kind of popular in YA, of setting up something that's going to happen 12 chapters from now, and it's there. You have to be very careful that when you go to, the cut scene of what's happening next, that scene is just as interesting to keep me going.
Yeah, or else people will forget about your awesome beginning and be like, I don't even care anymore.
Right. Yeah. And so, I have a client who does YA that her book started off with this great scene where the protagonist is running away from something, and she's not like being chased, but she's running, and there's all this stuff happening around her, and you're totally into the scene. And then it cuts to, and it's got and I wish I had that pulled up because it's got a great line and I can't remember what it is. And then when it cuts back to the first chapter, it doesn't go into, oh, I woke up and then I went and did this, and then I had some breakfast and I talked to my sister. It goes into, it's backtracked, I think like 6 months, that she's about to go snowboarding. And so you go from this action scene to, there's a little bit of a dip to another action scene because something really bad happens while she's snowboarding, which is the inciting incident, which we'll talk about those next week. And so you've got to, it's okay if you set up a prologue and then you backtrack, or you set up a prologue like The Dry does, of it sets up and then it switches to a completely different character, that you've got to keep that interest up. You can't be like, well, I set up the chapter and now I can dump all this backstory here.
Right. No.
Yeah.
Well, so I'm going to use an example that Dawn doesn't like, because, and I think I know, like, this book, We Were Liars by E. Lockhart, doesn't follow a very traditional story structure. And so it's a little bit jarring, I guess. And it's also an unreliable narrator, which I love, but can be problematic sometimes.
My favorites.
But so anyway, I just think, even though Dawn doesn't like it, the very beginning of this book, I think, is what made me love it. The first page is complete unto itself. Like, this is all the text you need to get pulled into this story, or at least for me. And it's just so, like, questionable the way it's presented. So it's very short, choppy sentences. And I'm not going to read the whole front page, but I'll just read the very first, like, 4 lines and then the very end. And it says, "Welcome to the beautiful Sinclair family. No one is a criminal. No one is an addict. No one is a failure." And then it talks a little more about, what goes on in the family. And at the end, it says, "We are Sinclairs. No one is needy. No one is wrong. We live, at least in the summertime, on a private island off the coast of Massachusetts. Perhaps that is all you need to know." But you've read enough in this one page to know that that is not all you need to know. And that there's a whole bunch of other stuff going on in here, and you want to know what it is. At least I did.
And I have to clarify on that book. I think the writing in that book is amazing.
Yes,
I do. I think it's very well written. It was the ending that I was like, which I will not give away, because it is a good book. If you're into Unreliable Narrators, it is a good book. But I figured something out about halfway through. And then when I got to the ending, it was one of those, I went through all of that. And this is where we are. So if you want some more information about that, you can contact me. I won't share it out here, but
just read it. It's a short book. Yeah,
it's super short. And it's very well written. Very, very well written. It's just that Unreliable Narrators to me at this point are done. Oh, that's cool. And I wouldn't, if I met her, I wouldn't tell her I didn't like the ending of her.
I told her you didn't. No, I'm just kidding.
It's just like, so my friend doesn't like it. And Unreliable Narrators are a little bit more complicated on those types of things too. because in like this might kind of go to Julie's story or Julie's question of like with Gone Girls and with some other of Gillian Flynn's books, you don't know, like starting off with what they're saying, you don't know how much of what they're saying is true and how much isn't. And that can be something that can totally draw you in.
Yeah.
And the great thing about the first page of We Were Liars is it's contradictory.
Right.
When they're like, welcome to our family. No one's a criminal. Well, that's not what I'm going to say when you show up at my house and I'm like, hey, come in and meet my family. By the way, none of us are felons. I mean, that's just not a normal thing to throw in there.
Not especially.
So it creates that curiosity again.
Yes. Well, I think we are pretty, we've really run up our time today.
So we got a lot of feelings about hooking.
Yes, hooking is important to us. Well, so as always, leave us your questions, email us, message us, whatever you need to do. You put resources. Do we want to point to certain resources on openings and stuff?
There's a book that I should have had ready called Hooked.
Okay.
Cannot remember.
We can link it.
We'll link it.
And if you haven't subscribed to our newsletter, now is a good time to do that. There's a link on our Facebook page. We're going to start making that far more active than it has been. And if you are considering coaching or editing services, that is the only place that you will probably find discount codes and special offers and that kind of stuff. So as editing can be expensive, and we know that, we want to make sure that the people who are following us and who have been, really supporting us also get supported. So
yes, we appreciate you very much.
Definitely. All right. So next week, what are we doing?
We are talking about inciting incidents, and we're going to talk about what they are, what they aren't, how they differ from the first plot point, which is what we're going to be talking about the week after.
Awesome.
So that is our plan.
Well, we will see you back here next week.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.